The kitchen, looking at a puzzle and a cabinet. Don't look at the cabinet. Look at the puzzle. Tell me about the puzzle. Cheyenne, what's the picture? It's a farm. There's a red barn and a cow that looks like Barbara Jean. Kelly laughed. Good. Stay on the phone. Tell me about the cow. Tell me every detail until the itch stops. They talked for 40 minutes. By the time they hung up, the itch had subsided into a dull hum. Cheyenne realized that her mother was right. You don't survive the hard way once. You survive the hard way every single day. She didn't take a pill. She didn't reach for the cabinet. She just finished the puzzle. And for Cheyenne, that was a victory greater than any gala or commission. Chapter 39. The Van Montgomery Expansion. Van Montgomery had decided that being a senior partner required a more sophisticated approach to marketing. He had traded his golden retriever for a digital strategy that involved drones, 3D modeling, and what he called the Vanthology. It's a multi-platform narrative experience, Mrs. H., Van explained, showing her a video on his phone. The video featured a drone flying through the heights, narrated by Van, in a voice that was trying very hard to sound like a nature documentary host. Witness the majestic suburbanite in its natural habitat, Van's voice intoned over shots of families having picnics. Observe the modern kitchen, where the coffee is always artisanal and the granite is always cool to the touch. Van, you sounds like you're stalking our clients, Reba said, leaning back in her chair. It's immersive storytelling. People don't want to buy a house. They want to buy a role in a movie. And what's my role? You're the producer, the visionary, the one who makes it all happen. And what's Julian? Van hesitated. He's the special effects coordinator, because he handles the big booms and the structural stuff. Reba smiled. For all his absurdity, Van had a point. They were telling stories. They were selling a future. But as she thought about the woman in Unit 12, she realized they needed to be careful. Van, I want you to add something to the Vanthology. Anything. More drones? I can get a second drone. No. I want you to add a heritage section. I want us to collect the stories of the people who lived on these lots before. I want a plaque in the community park with the names of the original families. We're not just building a legacy for the new people, Van. We're honoring the one that was already here. Van's face softened. The director persona dropped away, and the boy with the heart of gold returned. That's a great idea, Mrs. H. I'll get right on it. I'll call it the Heart of the Heart. Don't call it that, Reba said, but do it. Chapter 40. The Barbara Jean Intervention. Barbara Jean was in a state of existential crisis. Now that Reba was married and Cheyenne was mentoring, she felt like her role as the family's resident fire starter was being extinguished. I feel like a bundt cake without the hole in the middle. Brocky, she told Brock as he sat on the porch of the guest house. I'm just a solid mass of purposeless sweetness. Brock, who was currently reading a book on the psychology of the 442 defense, looked up. You're not purposeless, BJ. You're colorful. Colorful is what you call a house you can't sell. I need a mission. I need an obstacle to overcome. Well, Brock said, closing his book, Julian and Reba think I need a mission too. They're trying to upgrade my situation. Barbara Jean's eyes narrowed. Upgrade? What does that mean? Are they trying to move you to a different zip code? Are they trying to separate us? No. They're trying to give me a job, coordinating athletics at the college. Barbara Jean stood up, her pastel tracksuit rustling. A job? You can't have a job. Who will help me with the community garden? Who will listen to my theories on the spiritual properties of lavender? I'll still be here, BJ. It's time. I'm tired of being the ivy on the side of the house. I want to be the tree, or at least a well-maintained shrub. Barbara Jean looked at him, and for a rare moment she was quiet. She saw the look in his eyes, the same look she had seen when they first met. He was a man who needed to lead. He was a man who needed a team. Fine, she said, her voice small. But if you start wearing those short coaching shorts, I'm calling a fashion intervention. Deal, Brock said, pulling her into a hug. As the sun set over the Houston suburbs, the Hart family was once again in a state of flux. But this time, They weren't just surviving the change, they were building it. Chapter 41. The Summer of Shifting Shadows. The heat of a Houston August is not merely a temperature. It is an atmospheric condition that tests the sanity of the strong and the cooling capacity of the weak. For Reba, it was the season of the August slump. Listings were slow, clients were at the coast, and the air was so thick it felt like walking through warm soup. She was in the office, the fan clicking rhythmically overhead, when the front door chime rang. A man walked in. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore a suit that looked like it belonged in a different decade or perhaps a different city. "Can I help you?" Reba asked, putting on her professional smile despite the sweat beading on her upper lip. "I'm looking for Reba Hart," the man said. His voice was gravelly, with a faint trace of an East Texas drawl. "You found her. And you are?" "My name is Harlan Thorne. I believe you knew my father." Reba's smile froze. Harlan Thorne. The name sent a jolt of electricity through her. Her father had worked for them, and according to the family legend, they were the ones who had unceremoniously fired him when the market crashed in the 80s, leaving the Harts to scramble for every penny. "I knew of him," Reba said, her voice turning cool. "What can I do for you, Mr. Thorne?" "I'm liquidating the estate. There's a property, a large tract of land near the Brazos. My father always said it was the one that got away. He mentioned your father had the original survey records that were never turned over to the firm." Reba leaned back in her chair. "If my father had records, he kept them for a reason. And given the way your family treated him, I'm surprised you'd have the nerve to walk in here and ask for them." Harlan didn't flinch. "I'm not asking for a favor, Mrs. Hart. I'm offering a commission, a significant one. That land is worth 10 times what it was 30 years ago. If those records exist, and if you help me move that property, the Hart name will finally get the payout it was denied." Reba looked at him, her mind racing. This was more than a deal. It was a chance to settle an old score. But it was also a ghost from the past she wasn't sure she wanted to invite into her new life. "I'll look into it," Reba said, "but don't get your hopes up. My father was a lot of things, but he wasn't a man who left things unfinished." Chapter 42. The Attic of Secrets. That evening, Reba found herself in the one place she had been avoiding for years, the attic of her childhood home, which she still used for storage. It was a dusty, cramped space filled with boxes of memories, old school reports, Brock's college trophies, and a dozen trunks belonging to her father. Julian found her there, sitting on a trunk and sneezing as she sifted through stacks of yellowed papers. "Reba, what are you doing up here? It's 90 degrees in this attic." "I'm looking for the ghost of my father's career," she said, wiping a smudge of dust from her forehead. She told him about Harlan Thorne and the Brazos property. "You think the records are here?" Julian asked, sitting down beside her. "My father was a pack rat for anything related to land. He used to say that land was the only thing that didn't lie to you." They spent the next 2 hours digging through the trunks. They found old blueprints, personal letters, and a collection of vintage surveyor's tools. But at the bottom of the last trunk, wrapped in a piece of oilcloth, they found a leather-bound ledger. Reba opened it. It wasn't just a survey. It was a map of the Brazos property, detailed with meticulous notes in her father's elegant script. But as she read the notes, her eyes widened. "Julian, look at this." She pointed to a section of the map marked with a series of red X's. The notes beside them read, "Unstable foundation, subterranean cavern system, unfit for high-density development," Thorne warned. Advice ignored. "He didn't keep the records to spite them," Reba whispered. "And now Harlan wants to sell it," Julian said, his eyes darkening, "probably to a developer who doesn't know about the caverns." Reba closed the ledger. "The Thorne family fired my father because he wouldn't sign off on a lie. They tried to ruin him because he was honest. What are you going to do?" Reba stood up, the dust of the past clinging to her emerald silk dress. "I'm going to do what my father did. I'm going to tell the truth. But this time, I'm going to make sure the whole of Houston hears it." Chapter 43. The Whistleblower's Gambit. The following week, Reba invited Harlan Thorne to the office. She didn't invite him alone. She invited a reporter from the Chronicle and a representative from the Texas Geological Society.